So tonight we're going to start a new topic and we're going to be talking about mental health in the church. And according to the National Alliance on Mental Illness, an estimated one in every five adults experience mental health problems every year. That's 20% of adults. Every person has some risk, obviously, of dealing with mental health or having that become a issue or an illness, um, regardless of demographics. However, only 12.5% of church leaders say that mental illness is discussed openly and in a healthy way with their church. So tonight, really what we want to get across is first, that seeking help for mental health issues does not mean that you have a lack of faith. No one ever, I messed that up. No one would ever say that someone with a broken arm or a broken leg is less than a whole person. But people say that or imply that all the time about people with mental illness. So recently, I read a story about a lady named Kathleen Swindell Thompson. And she was talking about a time when her middle school daughter started drinking and cutting, and she became very defiant. And so Kathleen went to her church to seek help, to seek comfort, and just understanding. But what she was met with instead was a fix-it mentality. People were telling her that if she would do more Christian things, if she would pray more, if she would read her Bible more, if she worshipped harder, things like that, that God would fix this struggle that her daughter was having. And she said that people really began to judge their family, and it really made her want to quit church. Her thought was that although no one knew what it was like to live in their house, obviously none of these people lived in their house. Nobody knew what it was like, but it seemed like everyone had the answers on how to fix what was going on in their home. So after all the judgment she heard, or with all the judgment, she heard things like, God, obviously in scripture it says that God will give a peace that passes all understanding, and that God will spare this kind of suffering from people who have deep enough faith. But really, this made me realize that topics of mental health, of abuse, of chronic physical and emotional stress are not popular at all in church. And so that led to tonight's subject. So we want to start off by saying only God's grace is sufficient. When we pretend to be perfect, we're really communicating that other people must be perfect. And that hurts the entire family, the entire church. All stress, anxiety, depression is caused when we ignore who we are and start living to please others. Paulo Coelho said that. I'm terrible at pronunciations, but there you go. There's his name.
Everyone wants to see it.
Yeah. All stress, anxiety, and depression is caused when we ignore who we are and start living to please others.
Yeah, that's it's, I don't know why that is. I don't know why people, especially who've been in church for a long time, have to say that if you are dealing with these things, you have to do more, and God will take it away. And I feel like a lot of people try to do more, and when God doesn't take it away, then it makes matters even worse.
I agree. I know there have been several times that especially with grief, that there were 2 years after my best friend died, that every single day on the way to work, I would just bawl my eyes out. On the way home, I would bawl my eyes out because I didn't feel like I had anyone that I could really talk to about what I was feeling, because like we said, it's looked at as a lack of faith. And so in those alone moments, I would just cry. basically every alone moment I got. It's really unfortunate that people feel like they have to hide who they are at church, because that should be the place that we're able to open up and experience that freedom of just not having to hide.
Yeah. And it's kind of funny because while you're right, Alex, I feel like church is the one place where you can get away with uh, you when you walk inside the doors, you see these different people and the conversations are just so fast. You don't There's no time to have a legit conversation with people. And so the default, how are you doing? Good. And then next person. And it's like we don't give ourselves that space to be open, nor, I mean, I don't think the church in general does a really good job with giving us that space. That's just from my experience. I can't speak
Right.
for all churches.
And I think those two things are detrimental against each other. You say that you're fine because everyone else is fine. You say you're good, whatever you say, because everyone else is good. So there's just an expectation to come in feeling good, having a perfect life. And then also, whenever you're breezing through the conversations, like you said, you don't have the time to really talk, really experience life together, which is what the whole purpose of the church is. So I think those two things play off each other, and both of them together make the experience even worse.
And I think that it just creates a lot of frustration with your relationship with God. Just
You're pretty
expecting
quiet, Kevin.
oh, it creates a lot of frustration in your relationship with God. Is that better?
Yes, much.
Okay. And just expecting to be good all the time and not talking about those things that we go through in our mental health.
Yep. That is a very great point. You start feeling like you've tried to do what you think is expected, because that's what the church does. And then whenever these things don't help you to improve your mental health, then you start asking God, why? What am I doing wrong? What's wrong with me? And I remember going to my pastor a few years ago, 5 years ago, and just sitting down saying, what is wrong with me? Why can't why are things not looking up? Why do these things keep happening? And what have I done that's so wrong? What's wrong with me? I kept asking him over and over again, what's wrong with me? So that's a very good point, Kevin. So those who are struggling with mental health issues are often their own worst critics, kind of like we were just talking about. That's a great segue. Because they've been conditioned not to accept unconditional grace. We subtly communicate, like we mentioned earlier, that we have to pray more, read more, fast more to measure up and make God happy. These are some things that you should not say to people with mental illness. Ignore it, forget about it, fight it. You're better than this. That's a big one. You're overthinking. Truth is, we all overthink, especially people that have struggles with mental illness. Because, like I just said, we've conditioned ourselves not to accept unconditional grace. We've gotten into our heads, life circumstances have gotten into our heads, whether it be, struggling to see why, God, you have not taken this away from me. Things like that. We start to feel less than, and then it's a slippery slope from there.
I was just thinking how our natural reaction to when we hear someone with problems, our natural reaction is to provide a solution in words or whatever. Like, have you tried this? Have you tried that? And even when someone's going through something mentally, our initial reaction is, and I'm sure we don't mean to do that, but it just happens. We have to have something to say about a certain thing, and um, I think we need to start moving towards just being there for somebody and just being present.
It's an easy thing to fall into, trying to be a fixer instead of just sitting with people. Yeah, and I mean, in a way, it's part of our culture that if something's broken, you try and fix it. You just don't leave it broken. But what we don't understand is whenever you're dealing with other people in their lives, that you there is no perfect remedy. There is no easy button like they used to have at whatever box store that was. So whenever we whenever we try and just give people all the answers, all the solutions, we're diminishing the struggle that they are in and making them feel like, again, you should be better than this. You should be able to get out of this if you try hard enough, if you do the right things.
Yeah, I think to go along with what Jay-Z was saying is, I think in the church we are the look on your face, are programmed to think that way. You know, whatever someone's going through is like, well, here's the Bible verse that has to deal with that. Read that, pray about it, and everything should be good. And it doesn't always work like that. Like, it doesn't just fix serious issues overnight.
Right. One of the biggest issues is not, it's almost looked down upon. It's getting better, but still there's stigma around asking for help outside of the church, especially here in the South, because it's almost like they take it, people in church take it as you're saying, God's not good enough. I need some other person to talk to help me with these things. And and that's just not true in any way. No matter what you're talking about, you should never be looked down on for trying to improve, for trying to better yourself, or to seek help in those ways. And there should be no better place than the house of God to be able to heal from pain. That should be the place that they're encouraging you, and we're encouraging others to do what helps you. Do whatever you need to be healthy, to feel healthy. And I know for a long time, even with certain health things, it was looked down on if you didn't just pray and believe. I know a guy very well that always said, I don't need a doctor, I just need to pray harder. And I don't know, that just seems silly to me, to not use the resources God has given.
And I wonder if it's different. So I wonder if I know all three of us met in the Assemblies of God, so a more charismatic, more faith leads to so many different things.
Right.
And I wonder if other churches have different approaches to mental health. I know the church I currently go to, which is Disciples of Christ Church, my pastors are very much into seeking professional help for certain illnesses. I wonder if it's just more of a charismatic when we hear.
I I would hope so, because the responses I've seen have not been great. However, I'm not sure that that's the case. The stat that we opened up with was 12.5% of churches, of pastors, say that the mental health is talked about in a healthy way in their congregation.
Yeah.
So
I
hopefully there should. I get that. I hope there's more, but it's not overwhelming by any means.
Right, and I believe that too. As we were preparing for this, I came across a prominent voice in the Protestant church, and he had a clip. It was just a clip of what he was saying, just saying how like mental illness is demonic and stuff like that, and it's like when you hear that stuff when you're in the pew, like it's no wonder why only,
Right.
such a low number of people actually open up about it, because who wants to go through that, whatever
Right.
process is next after that.
Yeah, and I've heard that several times growing up, and you even think about Paul, who was talking about the thorn in his flesh. God, please take this thorn out of my flesh, and it didn't happen. And and my whole life growing up, I was taught that that was probably demonic, that he had a demon that wouldn't leave him alone. And the more you read it, as a more mature person, it sounds like he was struggling with mental illness. It was nothing that he could fix, but it was bothering him so bad that he was praying, God, please take this away, and writing about it to other churches. Which is interesting. I didn't think about this till just now, that even back then, he was talking to someone else about his mental health issues 2,000 years ago, and we struggle with that now. And kind of on that note, there are several other examples of mental health struggles in the Bible. Just briefly, Elijah in 1 Kings 9 1 through 5 is afraid after he has, the crazy thing is, he just has this huge victory over Jezebel with, the whole priest and the fire. If you don't know that story, go back and read it in 1 Kings 18. And he calls fire down from heaven on altars that are covered in water and all this. So he has this huge victory. The altar shouldn't have lit, and it did, is the story, basically. Sorry. And so he has this huge victory, and then he's afraid of what the queen's going to do to him. And so then he runs away and asks God if he'll just take his life. So besides Elijah, you have Moses did the same thing. He cried out and asked God to take his life. That was in Numbers 11:15. He said, if you're going to treat me this poorly, just kill me. Just take my life. And then obviously Jesus in Matthew 26:38 and 39. I put the wrong scriptures on there. Sorry, it's 38 and 39 though. That Jesus says, my soul is crushed even to the point of death. Stay here and keep watch with me, talking to the disciples. And then he went on further, obviously the scripture we all know, and said, my Father, if it is possible, let this cup of suffering be taken away from me. So he obviously was struggling in those moments. It said that he struggled even to, his soul was crushed with grief, even to the point of death. So we think of, a lot of times even, we think of mental health as a new problem because it wasn't talked about until very recently. Even in the last 20 years, it's become much more commonplace, but it's still not in the church. And it's really not a new issue. It's things that have happened since the beginning of time. And again, we say that these are things that we should not be struggling with if we pray harder and do more. But how can you pray harder than Jesus did?
Right. Yeah, he of all people should not have, if this is truly like God can take it away, he of all people should not have had mental illness. There proves the point that it's not something that can just be taken away. It's a real thing.
Shannon Adler said, the true definition of mental illness is when the majority of your time when the majority of your time is spent in the past or future rather than living in the realism of now. Like I said earlier, whenever I was really struggling with grief, I couldn't function in the now because I was living in the past so much.
And the importance of, when we can't live in the realism of now, it's hard to be there for the people that rely on us the most. That'd be family, friends, your job.
Right. Yeah, I have a lot of regrets from that area of my life, just not not being there, not being present. And I tried everything I knew how to, but like I said, counseling, therapy, these were not things that were commonplace. These are not, mental health was not something that was openly talked about. And so whenever I struggled in these ways, I didn't know how or where to turn for help.
Yeah, and speaking of which, Alex, do you have resources to share?
I do. I don't have them all aggregated yet, so we will have to post those whenever we post this on YouTube in the comments. But one big thing that I did want to mention right now is that I never knew until I asked other people for help. Whenever I first thought that I needed counseling, therapy, whatever you want to call it, I looked into a program, and it was $100+ for every visit, which is stupid expensive. I could not afford that, and so I just put it off for years. And then finally, I got to a point where I said, I have to have this no matter what. This, living like this isn't working for me. I have to do something. I finally just made the money work. But I found out that insurance actually covers therapy and counseling. You just have to look at who accepts your insurance. And then Taylor mentioned that she mentioned openpathcollective.org, and she said that's a great resource of affordable therapy. It's easy to fill out. It's a $60 one-time fee, and then depending on the therapist you choose, each session costs between $20 and $50 instead of the average of $100 to $200, like I was talking about, without insurance. So definitely check out opencollective.org. Open Path Collective, yes, .org, and that's much more affordable than what I was doing. So what I've been doing. So, and then check who takes your insurance. That's another big thing too that I didn't know was even an option. And then we have a couple more resources that we'll throw out there in the comments on YouTube.
Yeah, I think probably one of the biggest things is people don't understand how available these resources are to them. And like I was talking with you, Alex, earlier, that if more people knew how affordable this was, they would definitely have a better chance of going, or taking that step to helping themselves.
Yeah, with that, I mean, the two things, we're probably beating a dead horse at this point, but the two things that are the most devastating are, for one, that it's so stigmatized. Seeking help is so stigmatized that people feel like they shouldn't, that they're going to be looked down on. And then two, that it's not more affordable and more commonplace. So as I find more resources, I definitely will make those available, put those out there. The main point that I really want to communicate tonight is that seeking help never makes you weak. Seeking help is a sign of maturity, and it's a sign of strength. And if you don't have a community of people that will listen to you or will support you, this is a community for you. We have a Facebook group that's the same title, Mad Christianity. Feel free to join that, and we're would love to just listen to you, to hear your story, and to not necessarily help, but point you to any resources that we may know of, and just live, just live life with you.
Yeah, and it's a safe space. It's a closed group, so we look at everything before accepting people in there. So it's not hard to get in, but we also are mindful of who we let in. So, um, yeah.
What you think, Kevin?
Kevin, you got any thoughts on resources or anything?
I don't have any resources. However, I do just want to say that, um, therapy is becoming more mainstream, even in general, not just inside the church. But I just want to add that, if you feel like you need therapy, don't think that whatever you're going through isn't serious enough that a therapist would take you. Because I mean, even if you just have a series of minor like inconveniences in life, and you're like, "What do I do?" Not you may not necessarily be dealing with a serious, depression or a serious mental health issue. Like, go talk to someone. Like, that's what they're there for. Is to at least hear you talk and offer advice. So.
One big thing that I got from therapy that I never expected was how to deal with very small inconveniences, very small stresses, like frustration with a coworker whenever they just say something stupid, and it frustrates me. And I used to um, I don't know, I used to get my mind off that in unhealthy ways, drinking and whatever else, just to relieve stress. That if you're drinking to relieve stress, it's not healthy, because that's not going to fix anything. You're going to you're going to have the same stress. You're just going to be hungover for it, which makes it worse. um, so little things like that I never expected I would get from a therapist. Little helpful things like that made a huge difference in my life with the stress that I deal with every day for no reason. One of the things that she taught me, which was crazy, is that whenever whenever you become stressed, you can only focus on one thing at a time, which obviously hurts you in multitasking with your family if you're trying to cook dinner and have a conversation with your kid at the same time, or if you're at work and you're trying to do a couple things at once. So she taught me that if you just step away and you breathe and you count your breaths, your mind can only focus on that one thing. And so it will automatically stop thinking about whatever's stressing you out, which has been very helpful for me. I never had thought about that before. I have noticed whenever I get stressed out that I can only focus on one thing, but I never thought about forcing myself to think of something else so that I can't be focused on the stress, and then you come back calmer. So anyway, little things like that you just don't know, wouldn't think of. Probably, I mean, you might be able to find it on the internet. I've never tried to look, but also didn't know that was a major issue until I had some counseling. So I definitely would encourage that.
I was gonna say that makes sense why when we're worried about other things or stressed about other things, we don't. It's hard for us to think clearly. So it would make sense why you would never think about searching how to deal with stuff online, which it's probably there. We just
You don't think about
don't
it.
think about it.
Right. So Mental illness, true mental illness, occurs when our mental health is compromised or neglected for so long that it begins to affect our ability to function in our everyday life. This should motivate us all if you're struggling to find that help, even if, like Kevin said, if it seems small and insignificant. If you start to notice that it's not going away or that things are beginning to pile up, if you neglect it, it will become bigger and harder, uh, just like with our physical bodies, like we made the comparison earlier. It's probably, I mean, it's obviously a lot harder the more time you allow yourself to live in that state, because it becomes normal to you. You become desensitized. Um, and the unfortunate part is, this is how we in the Christian community have been expected to act for a long time. But it doesn't have to be that way. It doesn't have to. It does. It only has to affect you. That was a dumb sentence. I'm not going to say that. I almost said it only has to affect you as long as you allow it to, and that's not true. But there is ways that you can help. Ways that you can um, take steps forward, even if they're not going to rid you of, your thoughts or your struggles entirely, if that makes sense.
I had a thought. So if you're watching this and you don't currently struggle with, mental illness, um, Alex, if I can, I would like to share what my pastor sent me.
Yep.
So my pastor, I had asked her for some resources on mental health and stuff like that, and she sent me some things, but this one part in particular, I thought it was very profound. She uh, she quoted Philippians 4:13, and if it's a very popular verse. It says, "I can do all things through Christ which strengthens me." And she goes on to say, this is a quote from one of Paul's letters to his favorite group of church people. I personally used to get irritated by it because I thought Paul was saying, if you just pray hard enough, believe hard enough, love hard enough, you will get through it, whatever that difficult it might be. But a minister who was fighting cancer interpreted Christ as the body of Christ, meaning all the people that gave him a ride to appointments or cleaned up his sick. I don't know what that. I didn't even
I
read
think
that.
him being sick, cleaned it, like sick to your stomach, cleaned up him being
Oh,
sick to his stomach.
I
That's
gotcha.
how I read it.
That would make sense. Or brought him a meal, or prayed for him, are Christ. I can do all things through these people, the body of Christ, which brought him physical and emotional and spiritual strength. I think that is why we need to depend on people who are gifted in healthcare, mental health care, and faith care. All of these people, through listening, prescription giving, praying, can bring us Christ's strength. That's why we have grief groups and prayer groups and doctors and nurses and counselors. All of us working together can bring Christ's strength to folks. And I thought that was just really profound, and just that, um, again, for those who are watching and don't struggle with anything, that you yourself can play an important role just by being there for whoever is in need. And I think that's just something we take for granted.
Yeah, I'm not gonna lie. Whenever you sent me that, forwarded that to me from her, I read that scripture. And I was like, are you kidding me? This is the exact opposite of what we're trying to say. And she said, I can do all things through Christ that strengthens me. Because that's the one that, whenever I was doing some research, that's one that kept popping up. Like, it's the Bible is never made to be used as a weapon. We said it in our last series, and it's still true. And there are so many times that people say, well, I can do all things through Christ who strengthens me. So if you're not making it through this, then that's on you. You're not trying hard enough, or you're not believing enough. But yeah, I did finish reading the text, and then I was okay with your pastor again.
I'm glad you finished reading it. That would have been awkward.
Like,
no, I don't. You can't read that. You can't read.
Whenever she started off with that, I was like, "Come on, man!" Threw my phone across the room. Just kidding. But I did. I was like, "That is not. It's not what we're talking about." But so, do you guys have anything else you want to say before I start to wrap up?
Not at the moment, no. I know if we do have other thoughts, we do plan on continuing this series throughout the month. So I'm sure we got plenty of stuff coming if we can't think of it right now.
Yep. So most of tonight's talk has really been centered around the people, focused on the people that are struggling. But I kind of wanted to wrap up with a call to action of how we, as the church as a whole, can better help people and better support people, even if you don't have a current thing that you're struggling with. It should be all of our goals to reach, to help, to walk with as many people as possible. So the first thing is we need to learn to embrace the whole person. We can't be segmenting lives up according to what we're comfortable discussing. I've seen a lot of times where people, it's kind of like the whole hate the sin, love the sinner thing. Like, we just kind of push that side of people out of our view and just say, well, I can love this part of them, and if they're struggling in this way, that they can deal with that on their own. And that's such a tragedy, because people can't just break themselves apart. And so if they're struggling in a way that you don't feel comfortable talking to them, you really do a disservice to them by just ignoring that part. And that's huge with mental health. It's an uncomfortable, it can be an uncomfortable thing to talk about, because that's the way that we were raised for the most part. But that doesn't make it any less impactful. In fact, it's probably the biggest piece of us, the biggest part of us that needs love. And to live, I feel like this is such a cliche, but to live a true, full Christian life, we have to become comfortable around those people that Christ embraced. No matter what they're struggling with. So we can't. Who are you to push someone away if Christ embraced everyone? And then my final thoughts are, when is the last time that you have offered encouragement to a parent who has a child who's struggling with self-control? That's a tough thing for parents to walk through alone, and the parent oftentimes feels like they're inadequate, that they're not doing a good enough job. Have you sat with someone who is overwhelmed with anxiety? Have you spent time with them whenever they are just feel like the world's spinning out of control, and there's nothing you can do to make it better for them, but just spend time with them, be there for them in whatever ways they allow you to be. Have you ever comforted the parent or spouse of a person who has either attempted or has committed suicide? Again, there's nothing you can do to fix that hurt, but that doesn't mean we shouldn't be there for people, that we shouldn't offer them, if nothing else, a shoulder to cry on. And have you taken time to consider how Christ might become real to someone who really struggles with forming relationships with other people? That's a huge thing with churches. I know whenever I left my last church and was looking for a new church, from feelings of inadequacy and whatever, all the other things that I kind of alluded to, I didn't feel comfortable just walking into a church and having to meet all new people and everything like that. And I wouldn't say that I really struggle with anxiety, but those things can be overwhelming for someone that's struggling with anxiety, or someone that just doesn't make friends as very easy. To go into a place where everyone knows everyone and they don't know a person, or maybe know a couple people, or maybe even have some people there that they don't like or don't like them, things like that, that it's our job to make sure that they have just as much of an opportunity to experience Christ as the person that's been sitting in the pew next to us for the last 20 years.
I agree with everything you said. Yeah, it is. Yeah.
And I could go on and on, but that's just to get your brain flowing in ways that you can make a difference in someone's life, that you could maybe encourage, maybe be the encouragement someone needs to fight another day, not to end their life.
Yeah, I think for me, I don't. At one point, I wanted to be a counselor, but I can't. I don't have the capacity to write that much. At least I don't think. But just the easiest thing you can do is just listen, and that's what I've found is that's okay. Like if that's all you can do, like that's better than nothing.
A lot better. It's better than telling people what to do. Listening is key.
Any thoughts, Kevin?
I agree.
Do you have any more notes, Alex?
That's all I wrote. I do quickly want to say that, we just finished talking about the LGBTQ plus community, and suicide rates for them are twice the national average. It's way up there. So all these things we're talking about could easily be applied to them. And at the end of the day, it doesn't matter if you think people are right or wrong about anything that they do, but that shouldn't stop you from loving and accepting people. The whole notion is just ridiculous, but all these, I think most of these stats are probably higher in their community because of the is discrimination the right word? Discrimination?
I think so.
People looking down, all that type of thing. So, so if you know people, I guess just my final thought would be check on your LGBTQ plus friends, because chances are, just by statistics, they have a higher chance of struggling with these things because of discrimination. So,
And
throw that in there.
Yeah, and again, if you are new here, our channel is dedicated to showing you how to love God and love people. And um, if you're new here, we did a series last month on um, pride, and there you are. And oops. And anyways, if you want to check those videos out, they are on our channel. We actually have a playlist for it. So just click on the playlist and you can hear a couple of our interviews. Alex and I did a reaction to a pastor actually preaching some crazy stuff. Like I would not be surprised if he was on some drugs while he was preaching that. It was pretty intense. And then we made a video on steps you can do just to become an ally towards the community.